Hello guys, I'm Super Ron, welcome back to the channel, and we are back at Auto Shack and back on the Mk3 20 valve turbo project. I've done too many 20 valve conversions to remember now, but this is our first Mk3. So in the last episode, we got it all fitted in the bay, all mocked up, because I wasn't sure what things touched, what needed to move. And we found, in fact, these engines are an incredibly good fit in the Mk3 platform. So this week, we've ordered lots more parts to finalise the boost system. So we're gonna get it plumbed in for real this time. So we have had it all up and running. It wasn't overly happy being all open, but it did start, run, and stop. So we've got all that part taken care of. Now we need to look at all the pipework on the front. I've done lots of Mk2 builds with a removable front end before, and it is super convenient for getting engines in and out, but this is my first Mk3, and what I didn't know is they have a full plastic one-piece front end. So everything is molded as a big one-piece plastic panel. The slam panel, all the radiator mounts, even the radiator fan is all in part of the front panel. The radiator actually bolts in. It's got bolts there and there. So even though the radiator is on the front, it's secured on the back. And then there's just holes where the sensors poke through and where the coolant pipes poke through. So to change the rads on these, you actually have to take the front end off so the rad can come out forward. So a little problem that is going to cause for us, to fit a front-mounted intercooler, we usually try and move the radiator back a bit to give us a little bit more room for an intercooler at the front. Whereas with this, we can't, because if it was the other way round and the radiator mounted in from this side, we could space it backwards and that'd be okay. But because this is all one-piece plastic, there is no room to move it back, so that does limit our space for the front. But let's get this back on and see how things start lining up. Another new part of doing a Mk3 is something we haven't had to include before, is power steering. So I wasn't sure how the lines were going to run, whether we're going to have to get custom lines, whether we're going to have to cut and shut things, whether we're going to have to try and use the Mk3 pump on the Mk4 engine, what configuration we were going to have to go down. But as it turns out, all the Mk3 stuff bolts straight on to the Mk4 pump. So we deleted the air conditioning in the middle, but we kept the power steering down the bottom, and these are all the Mk3 lines, and all the banjos from the Mk4 with the pressure sensors fit perfectly together, so I haven't had to change anything. So this is a complete Mk3 line, and it still uses all the mounts, all the pipe works, all the brackets still line up. Even the return underneath is all Mk3 going on to the Mk4 pump. So that was nice and easy. So let's get this Mk3 plastic front panel back on and see what starts lining up. Our water pipe, the bottom one needs to go to there and the top one needs to go to there. So we'll see how they line up, because both the pipes are over this side. And there it is, all back on the front. So we've got our top radiator hose here. We want to scissor that round to here. And this is something I was a little bit worried about, because this fan can't be moved or adjusted. I was worried if it's going to hit anything in this area, but we are all clear. We might just need to move it over just a little bit to get the plug on here. The Mk3s have their own little module to control the fan, so we're keeping all that. So all the fan wiring and temperature sensors will all stay Mk3. We won't need to modify any of that. So I think if we just move that over a bit, we can get the plug on there. We're probably going to keep the header tank in the standard Mk3 position, which is there. On the Audi TT, it is over that side. So we have got the option if we do run out of room over here. And that'll mean the top bleed will be coming out of here and just go up to the header tank there, and then we'll join the header tank in down there. The factory Mk3 hose is still in there, and that is just sitting in the position where it came off the standard engine. And it doesn't look like it's going to be that far fitting straight on. So I might cut it in the middle, and we have got some extension tube, so I could cut it here, extend that out, and I reckon that will line up and go straight on, which will be nice. The other things that are going to go straight on are the heater matrix pipes. These are straight out of the TT, haven't changed anything, and they line up perfectly. We've got a couple of 90s and an extension, and that should zigzag that. And that'll be the coolant system almost wrapped up. Unfortunately, boost-wise, things aren't quite so simple. Because of this massive flat plastic front end, it's very difficult to get boost pipes through, and we haven't got a lot of room in front of the radiator. The radiator doesn't actually sit parallel with the front panel. So this end, we've got a nice lot of room there, plenty for the intercooler. This end, for some reason, the radiator is a lot farther forward. So we've barely got 2 fingers between this panel and the radiator. And underneath, things were looking even worse. As you can see, there is not a lot of room there to fit an intercooler in. I did manage to give the front panel a little bit of chops here and there, so I've got the boost pipes running down and able to come forward. So getting the boost pipes there isn't too big a deal, fitting an intercooler in here. Luckily, we found this bit comes off, giving us a little bit more room. As you can see here, we have got 3 fingers worth of room, not a lot. An easy solution in the older cars, we could just move the radiator back, but in this one we can't. And if we put the bumper on, things get even worse. Bumper on, looking very nice, but as you can see under here, the radiator nearly comes right forwards to those fins. We've got plenty of room this end. We could squeeze one in, but this end, the radiator is almost right up to these fins. We were hoping to keep these in for a much more subtle look. Of course, we could just cut all this out and just put a massive intercooler on the front, but we're trying to be as discreet as possible on this build. So I've had a little measure up and I have found an intercooler that goes from here to here, and it is a bit taller, comes up to about here. So we don't want to cut this out, but we can hollow it out on the inside, still get the airflow up and try and get it down as far as possible. We haven't really got much of an opening on the front. And here are our new bits. We've got all new boost pipes from Auto Silicon Hoses. Does exactly what it says on the tin. We always use these. They're really nice quality items. So we've got two 32mm for the top radiator hose, and then we've got this aluminium tube to cut down. So we'll use that for the top and also for extending our bottom radiator hose. We've got the boost pipes for the bottom and then the couplers to join the hard pipes. We've got our map sensor adapter. This is the one out of the TT, but it doesn't really fit nicely anywhere. But it's just a bolt-in flange for the map sensor. So that's exactly what this is. But that just fits in the same size as all our boost pipes. And then we have our intercooler. So this is a universal intercooler, but it fits in nicely to our size of what we've got available. This is a 550 by 140 core and 65mm thick. So although it hasn't got a massive frontal area, it is nice and thick. It's got mounting points on the top and bottom and 63mm ends, so it matches all our boost lines. So let's try this on the car and see how well we can squeeze it behind this bumper. So bumper wise, that's going to sit in there pretty nice. We can hollow out the top. We may have to lose these little slats so it can sit down a lot further forwards, but we'll see. Let's try and slot it up in there. I've just taped it up so we don't bend any fins. We probably will be painting this black, but I'll just keep it nice and straight. I've got this in here, but up there we are hitting and front panel is out. I think I might drill holes in here as well, so this will drop down. So then this bar will be right at the bottom here. That'll give us a lot more usable area. This side, loads of room. Shame the radiator's not flat, because then this end is hitting. So I've just marked where the 3 pegs are. I've marked where it's hitting. So I'll make some chop and be right back. Bit of choppy chop, and we're all clearing. So let's see how the bumper fits. And the answer to that is not a chance. We are nowhere near on, and we are up against these little pegs. So I think we're going to have to lose the grill, and hopefully it will sit in that slot nicely. Before going all out with the grinder, I just thought I'd try and trim these back a bit so you can see how thick that one is to how thick they should be, but it's still not quite far enough. And to get it to fit, the intercooler's not in the middle. Looks a bit naff. So I'll cut one off at a time, maybe do the outside ones, see if we can get them and get the intercooler in the middle, and then just keep the inner ones. If not, they all might have to go, and that'll just be all intercooler. Fitting an intercooler can be a really easy job. Just hack a big hole in your bumper, slap it in, boost pipes on, and you are done. Usually though, it looks horrendous. But sometimes when I'm doing bumpers like this, where I just want to trim a bit, try it on, trim a bit, try it on, trim a bit, try it on, it seems to go on forever. Sometimes I feel like I need to have a word with myself and say, just chop it out, slap it in, and you'll be done. But that is not super on weight, so I've just had hours of chopping and trying and chopping and trying and chopping and trying and chopping and trying. It seems like a never-ending, messy task. But the results speak for themselves. I've managed to get it fitting in there with all the bumper trims in place. So as you can see, managed to retain all the bumper grills. Got the boost pipes on each end, and I think that looks really subtle. We are probably going to paint this black, so you're not even going to see it in there. So here is our intercooler, and now the bumper's off, you can see how much of an angle I put it back at. Because we had clearance here, but we didn't have clearance at the bottom where the bumper scoops in. So I managed to angle it at quite an angle, but that'll work nicely, a bit like a V-mount where it'll scoop in and suck it up. We had the problem on this side of not a lot of clearance. So I've gone right as far as that side, but you can see this side, we had loads of room. So if the radiator was straight, that would have fitted in perfect. But I had a battle with this side. So that's where it sits. You also see I trimmed out a lot of the underneath to be able to fit it in and pull it forward at the top, and trimmed out there. But we are still solid, and we have an actual working crash bar including the mounts for the bumper. So I've chopped a lot out all the way through, but we are clearing everywhere. See, I've chopped the front panel both sides to get the boost pipe through, and then it travels up, clears everything up there, clears all the front panel, but you can see how much I've had to chop off to get it through. The structure is all still there. We've got mounts on the intercooler, so I've got a bolt on bit there, got a mount there and a mount there. So the intercooler is not hanging on the pipe, that is sitting in its place. So we've still got a nice lot of airflow, still scoops up to use the entire intercooler, and the end tank are going to be cooled as well. So I am really, really happy with that. So you can see inside the bumper has been hollowed out quite a bit as well. These were the fins that I spent a lot of work to keep. They actually used to go right back to the bumper here. So you can see how much I've squared them out to be able to fit the intercooler in. The intercooler does fit on here, and what most people do, they just cut them out there, and then the intercooler can just sit on the front. But I've gone the extra mile for that factory look. So there's been a lot of trimming and measuring. At the top here, we have our bumper mount. There was a mount there and there as well, but the intercooler came too close to be able to keep them. These are the mounts that were in it. So that used to sit up on there. So I took them out to aid the airflow. Same with that. I haven't had to cut any of the bumper out here. That's all factory. And then the boost pipes come out here, and they also clear these grills nicely. So I haven't had to modify any of these. I've seen some people, but they have to get rid of these, and the boost pipe runs along there and out, so you can see it through there. But again, on ours, we are nice and discreet. These are all the bits of the front panel that I cut out, bit pieces, chopped out everywhere. But we've got the desired result. So now if we start looking at the water pipes, I've got the top one sitting in there. I cut that metal tube down. We've got a 90 going to there, and we've got our other 90 to there. I've moved this pipe over, so it's all clear. We've got room now between the fans. What I did have to do to twist it is just that was fixed to that. So I snipped through the mount. All that is it's where the two pipes are formed together. So they just sit together, and that allowed me to rotate this one, which moved that over. So that now clears the fan. We've got our water pipe at the top, goes up to the factory header tank. We've got our factory water pipe coming out here, and this needs to tee into the coolant system. On the TT, the header tank is over this side. On the Mk3, it's over this side. So what you can do is relocate it over here, do all your pipe work this side, but I think we'll keep the Mk3 one over that side. The connections for the Mk3 was in the bottom, and this was joined to here. That goes into there, into the main water pipe underneath, which goes all the way around, then up to the bottom heater matrix. If we look at the old Mk3 engine, the header tank goes on to the metal pipe that goes all the way around and goes to the heater matrix. So we can tee in this area on the 1.8 turbo, and that will get to the same point. For the breather on the TT, it came out of this one, which goes up to our header tank. But on the TT, they have this hard metal pipe at the back, which goes up to there, ran along, came out the top, and that just hooked that to that. We've also got our purge valve on this side, which is in the same place as the TT. The purge valve system is also on this hard metal pipe, and where that comes from is this outlet here, which is the other side of the throttle body, goes to there with a one-way valve. That tees in to the intake with another one-way valve, so they both suck, and that goes all the way around, and that did go to the purge valve in the TT. So we've got to connect these together. We haven't got anywhere to put this pipe, so I'll probably get rid of this, link these together, and join that to the purge pipe. What we also had over this side, so this is the one that went to the header tank in the TT. This one went to the auxiliary water pump. So on the BAM, in this style TT, they have an after running coolant pipe. So the turbo water outlet is here, that went round, and that went in and teed into the top radiator hose. Well, this is controlled by the TT coolant module, so that's not going to work in our Mk3, so we got rid of all this. In 1.8 turbos without an auxiliary pump, these two are joined together with a little Y to the tank here. And what that means is we can just join these two together. That'll circulate the coolant out of the turbo back into the main water rail, which is where all these connections for the oil cooler and other bits and pieces go, and the heater matrix are back there going up to the top. So I can nice and easy tee that in there. That'll still circulate around to the coolant system, but retaining the header tank in our standard place. On the Mk2 build I did relocate it over here and use all TT pipe work, but how the bay is set out on this one, I think I'll keep it this side. And here's a better look at the coolant pipes I've made up. So we've got those 90s. I've trimmed the ends down so they fit nicer and then cut the pipe down. The only thing with cutting the pipe into sections is then you lose the bead off the end, which means the pipes have nothing and they'll just slide off. But we've got our own bead roller, so we can put the pipes in, spin, 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 and then it's got a bead on the end. Also done the same with all the boost pipes. So they've got a bead, so the rubber and Jubilee have got something to grip on. So that's the one that goes under there. I didn't end up using the standard pipes for the bottom one, because what happens with the standard VW ones, they might be 32 millimeters at the ends and ends when they're formed, but usually they shrink down to a lot smaller and then go back again for the ends, so they don't cut and join very easy. So I've got these ones, so that one is going to go under there. So you can see the lower one sits down there, and the upper one sits under there, so they're nicely on. We'll get them Jubilee clipped up and on to finishing the others. And that is the water system all plumbed in. Got the radiator hoses all in, they've all got their Jubilees on, they all run nicely. Lots of room under there, so it's not clashing with the inlet manifold. Nice lot of room between that and the fan. We've got our T-in for our header tank, and there's lots of room under there. That's where the cables come through for the gear change, so we've got lots of room there. We've joined our two hoses together there, so that runs from the turbo coolant round into the main rail. And then we've got a heater matrix in, and that goes straight on, no cutting, even used the TT clips. They're in exactly the same place, just go straight on with all the heat shielding and everything. So we can now fill it with coolant. But just before we do, I'll wrap up the rest of the pipe. So next up, I think I'm going to do our brake servo, which has got to go from here to the servo on the old inlet manifold that attached to it here, not over here. But I have got the TT one, so maybe we can get that to work, or a combination of the two, and then just our purge valve to connect to these ones. I'll be right back. So with a bit of chopping of the Mk3 and the TT pipe, I've made something that works. So this is TT, and then before, this long one is all TT, and that goes into there. But on the TT, it loops up, round, and then the servo must be further over, so that didn't fit in. But out of a bit of the TT, bit of the Mk3, we've got this that works. Then I put the one-way valve this end, so the boost doesn't go through, only vacuum this way, so that sits in there nice. So all we've got left is the purge valve. So we've got the pipe coming up here, and I think we can just go into there with the one-way valve. This must just be a secondary one that goes into the inlet here, depending whether on acceleration or deceleration, whether you've got a vacuum here or here. So I think I'll probably just tee them together, make sure the one-way valves are in both, and then run that along there. And there is the purge lines on. So I've moved it all up to this end, so the T-piece is now here, not up there. So we've got a pipe coming out of the inlet there, we've got a one-way valve there, we've got a T-piece here, we've got this one coming in, we've got a one-way valve here, T-piece going down, and that just runs under the inlet, pops out to our purge valve. I'm not sure for definite whether this one needs to be there because it's got the vacuum here. As this is our first purge valve setup, I think I'm going to run it as factory, but we're all in down here. Vacuums are all on, vacuum lines, boost pipes are all on. I think everything is now together, sealed, so we can start up. It's still going to be loud, but it should run a lot nicer now. Right, just before we put coolant in, let's go for our first all together connected startup. Right, let's get some coolant in it and then we can fully run it up. Right, let's get some coolant in. We're full up. None on the floor. Right, all topped up. Let's try it again. That's better. So it's still pretty loud because obviously there's no exhaust at the back. But that is purring away perfectly. So I'll let this run up now, circulate. It's got to fill the whole system up. That is running nicely. Just had it running for quite a while now, and the fan's just kicked in, so that's all working nicely. There it's stopping, and the temperature gauge is sitting bang on 90 degrees, so we don't need to put any resistors or anything in. So the rev counter, we didn't need our tacho box, that ran straight off the ECU, and the coolant temperature sensor runs straight off the TT sensor to the Mk3 clocks. Okay, so I've had that running up for a little while. We're all bled up, everything's looking good, so I'll let that have its cool down and then we'll check the levels and then we can bleed it up again. But it's all up to pressure and so far, so good. No leaks anywhere. It was idling really nice. We've got no vacuum leaks or boost leaks. So plumbing wise, we are all done. So a problem I touched on last week was there's something weird going on with the dash. When you turn the ignition on, everything comes up fine. The LCD display of the miles comes up, the fuel gauge goes up, your battery lights all stay on. When you go to start it, the whole dash turns off. Everything goes off. So I thought there must have been something weird inputting from the ECU to the dash that was freaking it out a bit. But I took off the RPM signal, the miles per gallon signal, other bits and pieces, and nothing made any difference apart from disconnecting the alternator. When the alternator is disconnected, you start it up, dash works fine, rev counter works fine, everything is spot on. Rev counter works. All the gauges are okay. You put the power wire back on the alternator, and as soon as you start it, that zips off to 0. Everything goes off, even the fuel gauge. So I thought it must be something wrong with the alternator, maybe it's overcharging, because these have got fully electronic dashes, and we were in the early days of fully electronic dashes. Maybe if it goes over 15 volts, it was freaking it out. So I swapped the alternator, and no difference. So this has been driving me mad for the past week. We've been talking about it at home. This has been a hot topic over the Christmas dinner, and we were stumped. It's putting out perfect voltage. It doesn't matter what inputs to the dash you disconnect, whether it's the oil pressure, oil temperature, coolant temperature, RPM, speedo, none of them make any difference. Even if you unplug the battery light, the whole dash goes off. It is really, really peculiar. But I've just had a phone call from my dad, and I think this may have cracked the case. The thing that kept puzzling me is why, when you disconnect the alternator, everything is absolutely fine and happy. Obviously it's not charging, but the battery is running the car and the dash is happy. So the theory my dad has put through is the connection to the dash via the alternator is for the exciter wire. And that's what puts your battery light on the dash. When you start it up, that goes out. And how that actually works is the dash sends 12 volts to your battery light bulb, and then it goes all the way down to the alternator and it grounds out on the body of the alternator. So you've got a normal circuit, light is on. What happens when it starts charging, the alternator sends positive back up to the battery light, so then your battery light has got positives on both sides, so the light goes out. So when you turn the ignition on, the dash sends 12 volts to your battery bulb, goes down and earths out on the alternator. So what if we've missed out an earth somewhere and the dash is using that 12 volts through the bulb down to the alternator casing, and that is where it's getting its earth. So as soon as it starts, that earth disappears, the clocks go off. The reason it all works with the battery power disconnected is because the alternator never starts charging, so that wire is always going to earth. So I started having a little look at the wiring diagrams. So here are the diagrams for the Mk3. These are where it all goes up. These are the sensors for the oil temp, oil pressure, speedo, and where they all go into the fuse box and then come out. Now remember, all these go through our round plug, which was the 28A and then the slash for each pin, what each one did. So we've got oil temp, T28A /7, which is a green and black. T28A, pin 7 is the green and black. So that was our oil temp, and it all works like that. Now, what I noticed down here, we've got a little earth loop. T28A /8, brown and white. T28A /8, brown and white, which is this wire here. Now these wiring diagrams are a little bit confusing. You've got positives on line 30, ignition on line 15, and then you got the earth down the bottom. So everything runs down to the earth bar at the bottom. Well, this link here, which is that brown and white wire, goes from earth point 221 to 18. On here, 221, which is what the speedo earths out on, and K, which is the dash, T28.5. So all these points join together in the loom at 221, which is earth connection, engine earth, in engine wiring harness. 221 then links to point 18, earth point on engine block. So what it seems like is the dash and all the sensors earth together in the main engine loom, but then it earths itself on the engine through this plug. So now we've disconnected this plug, this earth point isn't going anywhere anymore. So it does seem strange that everything is run in the loom, but the earth point is on the block. But that is what the wiring diagrams are suggesting. So I'm just going to unwrap the loom here, which is where our brown and white wire still is, because we didn't use that for anything. Put that to earth, then that should solve our problem. Oh, and what do we have here? Our brown and white wire. I've just taped it up and left it in the loom. So that comes from the clocks, and then that was earthed on the block when it used to go through this plug, which obviously isn't there anymore. So let's just try earthing this puppy and see if that fixes our clock problem. Right, for testing purposes, let's see if the old man is right. Right, let's see if we're working. So ignition on, everything resets and is happy. But when we used to turn the key, it's worked. So we got odometer all working, miles all working, rev counter working, fuel gauge working, all the oil pressure's gone out. It is happy. Let's try again. So, moral of the story, always respect your elders. So I got all that wrapped up, taped up and put in properly, and I've connected that up to the main earth that we've got going to the loom, so that's all earthed now. The last wire we had hanging around here last week was for the Mk3 thermal fan switch, because what we found, the cooling module, as well as having an input from the coolant temperature, it also has an ambient engine bay temperature. So if the engine stops and the coolant temperature is okay, but the engine bay is really hot from the exhaust manifold, it'll blow the fan through. But I couldn't find anywhere to mount it. But while I was letting that run up, we got this box from our friend Barney, and I was just looking in here and I found this. That looks very much like the sensor, and it's got its own little bracket, so we can bolt that on to the side of the engine and connect that up. The problem I was finding, I couldn't find anywhere to screw this thread in, but with this bracket, so I could bolt it on anywhere and it'll be earth, and then we just need to connect that wire, and then the fan module that sits under there will be fully working. So I'll get that in, and then we will be wired, fully Mk3 wired complete. And I've got that little fan override switch just in there, and I've put the factory plug on it just the same as it was in the Mk3. So let's finish that off for a complete bay. And there we are, all dressed back up and looking pretty impressive. I am happy with how this has come out. We've got all the vacuum lines for the servo, all the other breathers, water pipes, coolant pipes, everything is now installed. We have got this scruffy old air filter on it at the moment. We're just trying to gauge what size we can fit in there because we are a bit cramped for space. A lot of the Mk3 conversions that I've seen have actually relocated their battery to the boot, so that might be a plan B. We'll see if we can get a smallish one in there. If not, it's not too bad to do a battery relocation, and then we just get a massive air filter in there. But it's been really nice because we're using all the factory pipes everywhere. Everything is sitting really, really well. But most of all, I'm happy that we have sorted the dashboard problem. I've been thinking about that all week, all over Christmas. We've been talking about it at home. We've been putting through different scenarios, different possibilities, what it could be. I've been looking at an over voltage or an interference signal that's upsetting the dash, but it was my dad that came through with the brainstorm about the earthing through the alternator. And now we know, of course, it makes perfect sense. But at the time, we just couldn't work out why charging would upset the dash, but it's in fact the reverse. So I think we can just about wrap this episode up now. All the plumbing is complete, all the wiring is complete, and it is all up and running. We've incorporated all the Mk3 Golf systems with the 20 valve turbo, and everything is synchronized perfectly. I am super duper happy how the intercooler have come out, how all the pipes are hidden, how the intercooler is squeezed as back as far as it can, and we've managed to keep the little grills in front of it. So if we do decide to paint that black, no one is going to have any idea what is hiding under the bonnet. So if you're only just joining us today, this is episode 4. We've had stripping the TT, we've had fitting the 20 valve into the Mk3, we've had a monster wiring episode, and today was the plumbing. So in the next episode, like I said, we've got lots of bits to go inside. We've got the pedal, we've got the clutch switch, we've got the brake switch, we've got the OBD port. We've also got to finish off the clutch line because we have converted this to hydraulic clutch, so I'm going to be making up a braided line for that. And then we'll get the cable gear change in, and I think we should be able to drive it. So make sure you join me next week. Thank you again for all the support we've been getting for this build. You seem to be really enjoying it and even even the extra long episode last week. If this is your first time viewing, make sure you subscribe to the channel because we'll be doing many more builds like this in the future and you'll get notified for the next episode. But until then, make sure you have fun.